August 2025. A government jet drops toward an airport in Bulgaria. On board is the President of the European Commission, one of the most protected people on the continent. And then, in the cockpit, the instruments stop telling the truth. The GPS is gone. The pilots land the old way, by paper map. It was not an accident, and it was nowhere near the first time. All across Europe, planes and ships have been quietly blinking off the map. The signal that guides almost everything we do switched off for a few seconds at a time, again and again and again. This is the story of an invisible signal, a continent going dark, and the one man who traced it all the way back to its source. The question still hanging over it: was it a test or a weapon? 20,000 kilometers above your head, a ring of satellites is whispering. Each one sends down a signal with about the power of a household light bulb, seen from 2 Earth diameters away. By the time it reaches the phone in your pocket, it is almost nothing. It is a small miracle it works at all. And it is frighteningly easy to silence. Because GPS was never only about finding yourself on a map. It is the hidden clock the modern world runs on. Stock markets, power grids, mobile networks, shipping, the timing underneath almost everything. A free gift from America that the entire planet quietly wired itself into, which means whoever can switch it off can reach into all of it at once. There are 2 ways to attack a signal this fragile. The first is jamming, burying the whisper under a wall of noise until the receiver simply goes blind. The second is far more unsettling. Spoofing. You don't silence the signal, you replace it, feeding a ship or an aircraft a false position that looks completely convincingly real. At sea, the result looks like science fiction. Ships leap hundreds of miles in a single instant. They vanish. They reappear parked impossibly in the middle of a city. In one stretch of the world's busiest shipping lanes, close to 1,000 vessels a day were scrambled at once, none of them truly certain where they were. In the sky, it is worse. A spoofed jet can lose its collision alarms and the terrain warnings, the very systems meant to stop it flying into a mountain in the dark. More than 1,500 flights a day have been hit, and the people in the cockpit often have no idea their world has been quietly rewritten. For years, all of this looked like scattered local trouble. Then in November 2024, a GPS expert named Todd Humphreys got a strange tip. Look at 2 specific days, at exact times, inside a pile of data collected years earlier and left sitting in public online. If something was hidden in there, surely someone would have found it already. They hadn't. At the exact moment from the tip, every receiver in the network reported the same thing. The navigation signal, suddenly crushed, 10 times weaker, all at once. So he went looking back through the years, and he found it again, and again, and again. 75 separate days since 2019, the same shadow falling across the data. This was no jammer on a tower down the road. The same instant of silence struck receivers from Svalbard in the Arctic, all the way to Spain, from Canada in the west to the edge of Poland. An entire continent blinded in the same heartbeat, and the pattern pointed to a center, out over Poland and the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad. To strike everywhere at once, the source could not be on the ground. The curve of the Earth itself would block it. The geometry left only one answer. It had to be coming from at least 1,200 kilometers up, higher than the space station. Something in orbit was reaching down and switching off the sky. Could it simply be the sun? No. A solar storm swells and fades over long minutes and smears across the whole radio band. These bursts were surgical, 3 to 5 seconds, a razor-thin sliver of frequency aimed precisely at the navigation band. This was not nature. This was aimed. They worked the timing back through the geometry, and it settled onto a single object. A Russian satellite, Cosmos 2546, one of a constellation of 6, riding a long, looping orbit that lets them hang for hours over the top of the world. Their official job to watch for the launch of enemy missiles. In other words, it is part of the nervous system of Russia's missile warning shield. And from that orbit, it can reach far beyond Europe, across the Atlantic, over the United States. The pattern said this wasn't random. The frequency said it wasn't natural. And now the trail said it was coming from a machine of the state. And while the researchers chased the signal, the real world was already paying for it. The commission president's jet landing by paper map. A passenger airliner going down in Kazakhstan, 38 people killed, in the middle of GPS chaos thrown out by nearby air defenses. This was no longer an abstract puzzle. And the numbers kept climbing. In a single year, Finland alone logged almost 3,000 of these incidents, up from 200. Air crews reported a 500% jump in spoofing. Most of them now fly afraid of it. And just one day of a global blackout would cost a single economy more than $1.5 billion. In the Strait of Hormuz, during the war between Iran and Israel, close to 1,000 ships a day were jammed at once. Traffic through one of the planet's great oil arteries dropped by a fifth, as captains refused to move except in daylight. A war you could fight without firing a shot, just by switching off everyone's map. So what is it, really? The man who found it chose his words with great care. I can no longer say this is accidental with confidence. He leans towards something colder, a periodic test, a weapon being quietly rehearsed for a war that has not started yet. But the team that traced the satellites saw it differently. What if these bursts are not jamming at all, but messages? Short, sharp signals hidden on the navigation band, the one place an enemy would never dare to jam back for fear of blinding himself. A second burst even brushed against China's satellites. Nobody can prove which it is. Here is the part that should keep you up at night. That orbit does not just shadow Europe, it sweeps across the entire northern world, North America included. The jamming over Ukraine has already punched a hole in GPS coverage for satellites in low orbit above it. The signal we built our whole civilization on top of turns out to be a whisper that anyone can shout over. An invisible utility, a continent going dark, a single satellite, and a question no one will answer out loud. A test or a weapon? If you want the full deep dive on how they cracked it, our WTF Files Deep Dive podcast episode is linked below. You've been watching a WTF Files production. We'll see you in the next file.